The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage. Through the open window above my workbench, I heard voices drifting from the kitchen. My wife Beth and my 15-year-old daughter Bree, having what sounded like another one of their late-night heart-to-hearts. Why would I want Dad around more? Bree's voice carried that teenage sneer I'd grown to know so well. Mom says he's just holding us back. At least Uncle John knows how to have fun. I froze, my hand halfway to retrieving the wrench. Beth's laugh followed, that crystalline sound that used to make my heart skip but now felt like fingernails on a chalkboard. Your father means well, honey, but some people are just limited in their vision? Limited in their vision. That's what 22 years of marriage gets you, a psychological evaluation delivered through a kitchen window at 11:30 on a Tuesday night. I'm James Parish, 43 years old, owner of Parish Electric, the company that keeps half this Rust Belt town's lights on. Limited vision my rear end. I stood there in the shadows of my own garage, listening to my family dissect me like a specimen in a biology class. The irony wasn't lost on me, an electrician getting shocked by his own household current. Uncle John says Dad's just jealous because he never made it out of this dump, Bree continued, and I could practically hear her rolling her eyes. Uncle John. My brother Jonathan, 3 years older and about as subtle as a brick through a window. The same John who borrowed $15,000 from me last year to cover what he called temporary cash flow issues. The same John who'd been showing up at family dinners more often lately, always with some story about his latest business venture or weekend adventure. I picked up the wrench and turned it over in my hands. 26 years I'd been building Parish Electric, starting with nothing but a beat-up van and a toolbox inherited from my old man. I'd put both daughters through private school, bought Beth her dream house in Riverside Heights, and kept this family running while she built her real estate empire downtown. Limited vision. The kitchen window slammed shut, cutting off their conversation. I stared at the dark glass, seeing my reflection staring back. Work clothes, grease-stained hands, the kind of guy who fixes things while other people break them. Well, maybe it was time to learn a new skill set. The next morning, Beth swept through the kitchen like she owned the place, which, according to the mortgage papers, she technically did. Her real estate license had been pulling in serious money the last few years, enough that she'd started making noises about restructuring our financial arrangements. Coffee's cold, she announced, not bothering to look up from her phone. Machine's right there. I gestured toward the counter while flipping through the morning mail. She shot me a look that could have powered the neighborhood. I have 3 showings today, James. The Riverside property alone is worth more than your company pulls in a month. There it was, the daily reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. I used to argue, point out that somebody had to keep the lights on in this town, that blue-collar work was honest work. Now I just nodded and drank my coffee. John's picking up Bree from school today, Beth continued, still scrolling through whatever was so fascinating on her screen. She has that project due tomorrow. I could pick her up. You'll be on some job site covered in dust. John doesn't mind. Of course he doesn't mind. St. John, swooping in to save the day while dear old Dad crawls around in crawl spaces and attics. I wondered what other family duties my brother had been taking over lately. Beth grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing just long enough to deliver her parting shot. Try not to track mud through the house when you get home. I'm showing it to the Hendersons at 7. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and a growing suspicion that I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. At the office, my sister Connie looked up from the dispatch board with that expression she got when she had bad news to deliver. Parish Electric operated out of a converted warehouse on the south side of town. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Or mine, technically, though Mom still held the majority shares as a silent partner. Riverside Shopping Center called, Connie said. They want to know why we're charging them for work John authorized but never completed. I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. What work? Apparently your brother told them we'd rewire their main electrical panel for free as part of some customer loyalty program. They've been waiting 3 weeks. Customer loyalty program, that was a new one, even for John. My brother had a talent for making promises with other people's money and labor. Where is he? Haven't seen him since Monday. Said he had some important meetings downtown. Downtown, where Beth worked, where all the important people with their important meetings gathered to discuss important things while the rest of us kept their world running. I spent the morning putting out fires, literally in one case, where faulty wiring in an apartment complex had started smoking. By lunch, I was covered in dust and wondering why I'd ever thought running a family business was a good idea. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. That's when I saw John's truck parked outside Marcello's, the Italian place where Beth liked to take her high-end clients. Through the window, I could see him sitting across from a woman with blonde hair, gesturing animatedly while she laughed at whatever story he was telling. The woman turned, and I got a clear view of her profile. My wife. Having lunch with my brother while I was supposed to be the one tracking mud through the house. I sat in my work van for 10 minutes, watching them through the restaurant window. They looked comfortable together, familiar. The way Beth leaned forward when John spoke, the way she touched his arm when she laughed. It was the kind of body language that told a story I didn't want to read. But here's the thing about being an electrician. You learn to trace problems back to their source. Every short circuit, every blown fuse, every mysterious power outage has a cause. You just have to be patient enough to follow the wires. I pulled out my phone and did something I'd never done before. I took pictures. John and Beth, cozy in their corner booth, looking like anything but in-laws grabbing a quick business lunch. The afternoon crawled by like a wounded animal. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be Beth with some explanation, some innocent reason why she'd been having lunch with John. Instead, I got text updates from my crew, supply house confirmations, and a message from Bree asking if I could pick her up from school. Interesting. I thought John was handling that duty. I arrived at Riverside High at 3:15, parking behind a line of SUVs and minivans driven by mothers who'd never worked a day in their lives. Bree emerged from the building with her usual crowd of friends, all of them glued to their phones like the devices contained the secrets of the universe. Dad? She looked genuinely surprised to see me. Where's Uncle John? Change of plans. Hop in. She climbed into the passenger seat, still frowning. He was supposed to help me with my history project. He knows all about the stock market crash and stuff. Of course he does. St. John, historian and financial expert. I wondered what other subjects my brother had been tutoring my daughter in. What's the project about? Economic inequality in America. Uncle John says it's all about people not taking risks, playing it safe instead of going for the big opportunities. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Is that what he says? Yeah. He says some people are just wired to think small, you know? Like they'd rather have security than success. Think small. Limited vision, wired for failure. The hits just kept coming. We drove home in relative silence, Bree absorbed in her phone while I processed the day's revelations. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I'd made a decision that would have surprised my family if they'd been paying attention. I was going to start thinking big. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I paid attention. Real attention, the kind that comes from finally admitting you've been living in a fog of willful ignorance. Beth arrived home at 6:30, already dressed for her 7 o'clock showing. She breezed through the kitchen like a tornado in heels, grabbing papers from the counter and checking her reflection in the microwave door. How was your day? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. She paused, just for a second, but I caught it. Busy. 3 showings, 2 follow-up calls, and lunch with a potential investor. Anyone I know? Probably not. He's looking at commercial properties downtown. He? Interesting pronoun choice for my brother Jonathan. The Henderson showing still happening? Of course. Why wouldn't it be? She was moving again, gathering her purse, her keys, her phone, all the essential tools of a woman with places to be and people to see. Just wondering. Thought maybe you'd want to grab dinner afterward. Beth stopped and looked at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank together. James, I'll be lucky if this showing wraps up by 9. The Hendersons are very particular about their requirements. She left in a cloud of expensive perfume and exhaust fumes, her BMW disappearing down Riverside Drive like she was fleeing the scene of a crime. Maybe she was. I waited exactly 30 minutes before implementing Phase 1 of my new Thinking Big strategy. The Henderson showing was taking place at 412 Elm Street, a colonial revival that Beth had been trying to move for 3 months. I knew this because I'd rewired the entire second floor last year, back when the previous owners thought updated electrical would help their sale. It didn't, but it gave me intimate knowledge of the house's layout. I parked 2 blocks away and walked through the neighborhood like a man taking an evening stroll. Riverside Heights was the kind of place where people minded their own business, as long as your business didn't lower their property values. The house was lit up like a Christmas display. Beth's staging expertise on full show. Through the front window, I could see her gesturing toward the crown molding while a middle-aged couple nodded appreciatively. Professional Beth in her natural habitat, selling dreams to people with more money than sense. But here's what caught my attention. John's truck was parked around the corner on Oak Street, tucked between a minivan and a sedan like he was trying to avoid notice. I circled the block, staying in the shadows, watching. The showing lasted exactly 43 minutes. The Hendersons left first, shaking hands with Beth on the front porch before climbing into their Cadillac. Beth waited until their taillights disappeared, then locked up the house and walked to her car. She didn't drive home. Instead, she made a left on Oak Street, pulling up behind John's truck. I watched from behind a convenient oak tree as my brother got out of his vehicle and climbed into hers. They sat there for maybe 5 minutes, talking about something that required a lot of hand gestures and head shaking. Then John leaned over and kissed her, not a brotherly peck on the cheek, not a friendly hug between in-laws. A full contact, no doubt about it, somebody's cheating on somebody kiss that lasted long enough for me to take 3 very clear photographs with my phone. I stood there in the darkness, watching my wife and my brother conduct their affair 50 yards from a house she'd just shown to potential buyers, and felt something shift inside my chest. Not heartbreak, that would come later. Not rage, though that was building. What I felt was clarity, the kind that comes when all the scattered pieces of a puzzle suddenly click into place. The late nights, the business lunches, the way Bree talked about Uncle John like he was some kind of hero, the customer loyalty program that didn't exist, the important meetings downtown. I'd been looking at this all wrong. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. It was a hostile takeover, executed by people who thought I was too stupid to notice. Well, time to prove them wrong. I walked back to my truck with steady steps and a clear head. Phase 1 was complete. I had evidence, I had a timeline, and I had a plan that was already forming in the back of my mind like a blueprint for something that hadn't been built yet. At home, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. Beth's real estate website featured glamorous photos of her posed in front of sold signs, her bio describing her as a dedicated professional who puts family first. Family first. That was rich. I opened a new browser window and started researching. Phone records, financial statements, social media accounts, all the digital breadcrumbs that people leave behind when they think nobody's paying attention. Beth's Instagram was a masterpiece of suburban fantasy. Pictures of our house, our daughters, our family vacations, all carefully curated to project an image of domestic bliss. The comments were even better, friends and clients praising her for being such a devoted wife and mother. If they only knew. John's Facebook page was pure John. Photos of himself at bars, at sporting events, at various social gatherings where he was always the center of attention. Lots of pictures with women, including several recent ones with Beth at what looked like business functions. I saved everything to a folder on my desktop labeled Electrical Diagrams. Let them try to figure out that filing system. By the time Beth came home at 10:15, I was back in the garage, ostensibly working on a project that required my full attention. She poked her head through the door just long enough to announce that she was tired and going straight to bed. "How'd the showing go?" I asked without looking up. "Fine. The Hendersons are interested but want to think about it." "That's great, honey. I'm sure you gave them plenty to think about." She was already gone, her footsteps echoing up the stairs to the master bedroom that we'd been sharing in, name only for the better part of 6 months. I stayed in the garage until midnight, planning my next move. The beauty of electrical work is that it's all about connections, understanding how power flows from one point to another, what happens when circuits get overloaded, and how to safely redirect current when the original wiring fails. My marriage's original wiring had definitely failed. Time to install some new circuits. The next morning brought fresh revelations, courtesy of my daughter Beau, who was 13 and still young enough to occasionally treat me like I mattered. "Dad, can you drive me to Sarah's house after school? Mom said she'd do it, but now she says she has to work late." "Another showing?" "I guess. She's been working late a lot lately." From the mouths of babes. I ruffled Beau's hair and promised to pick her up at 3:30. At the office, Connie was waiting with more John-related damage control. "Riverside Shopping Center called again. They want to speak to you directly about the work your brother promised." "Set up a meeting for this afternoon." "What should I tell them about John?" "Tell them he's been reassigned to special projects." Connie raised an eyebrow but didn't ask for details. My sister had been running interference for John's various schemes for years, but lately even her patience was wearing thin. I spent the morning handling actual work, the kind that involved fixing problems instead of creating them. There's something satisfying about troubleshooting electrical issues, finding the source of the problem, and implementing a solution that actually works. Unlike family problems, electrical problems follow logical rules. At lunch, I drove past Marcello's again. Sure enough, John's truck was in the parking lot, same spot as yesterday. This time, I didn't stop to watch. I had better things to do. Instead, I visited my mother. Ruth Parish lived in the same house where John and I had grown up, a modest 2-story on the east side of town that she'd maintained like a shrine to better times. At 78, she was still sharp enough to balance a checkbook and stubborn enough to hold controlling interest in Parish Electric despite my repeated offers to buy her out. James. She opened the door with the kind of smile that made me remember why I'd always been her favorite, even if she'd never admit it. What brings you by in the middle of the day? Can't a son visit his mother without an ulterior motive? Not when that son is you, and not when he's got that look on his face. I followed her into the kitchen, where she immediately started fussing over coffee and cookies like I was still 12 years old. How's Beth? I haven't seen her in weeks. Beth's busy. Real estate market's booming, apparently. And John? He missed Sunday dinner again. John's been exploring new opportunities. Mom set down her coffee cup and fixed me with the stare that used to make me confess to breaking windows before she even knew they were broken. James Parish, what's going on? So I told her. Not everything. Not the photographs or the surveillance or the growing folder of evidence on my laptop. But enough. The missed family dinners, the mysterious business meetings, the way Beth and John seemed to have their own private conversations that didn't include the rest of us. Mom listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each revelation. That boy, she finally said, and I knew she wasn't talking about me. I should have seen this coming. His father was the same way. Charming on the surface, but rotten underneath. John's father, not my father. A detail that most people in town had forgotten over the years, but one that had shaped the dynamic between my brother and me since childhood. What are you going to do? Mom asked. I'm still working on that. She reached across the table and patted my hand with fingers that were still strong despite their age. Whatever you decide, you have my support. And my shares in the company, if it comes to that. I squeezed her hand and felt something settle in my chest. Family loyalty, it turned out, was more complicated than I'd thought, but it wasn't completely extinct. That afternoon, I picked up Bo from school and listened to her chatter about her friends, her teachers, her plans for the weekend, normal teenage concerns from a daughter who still saw me as someone worth talking to. Dad, are you and Mom okay? The question came out of nowhere, delivered in the careful tone that kids use when they are testing dangerous waters. Why do you ask? I don't know. You guys don't really talk anymore, and Mom's always on her phone, even at dinner. Smart kid. Too smart, maybe. Your mom and I are going through a rough patch, sweetheart, but that doesn't change anything between you and me, okay? Bew nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Another casualty of Beth and John's grand romance. Another person who'd get hurt when this whole thing finally exploded, which, if I had anything to say about it, would be sooner rather than later. The plan crystallized over the next week like ice forming on a power line, slowly, inevitably, and with the potential to bring down everything it touched. I started small. A conversation here, a casual observation there, nothing that would trigger alarms, but everything designed to plant seeds of doubt in the right minds. Funny thing, I mentioned to Dale Morrison, who ran the hardware store and knew everyone's business in town. Saw John and Beth having lunch at Marcello's the other day. Looked pretty cozy for in-laws. Dale raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. He didn't need to. In a town like ours, raised eyebrows traveled faster than gossip, and gossip traveled faster than light. At the Riverside Shopping Center meeting, I played the concerned business owner, apologizing for my brother's overzealous customer service, while making it clear that Parish Electric didn't make promises we couldn't keep. John's always been more of a big-picture guy, I explained to the property manager. Sometimes he gets ahead of himself. The property manager nodded knowingly. Everyone had dealt with someone like John, full of grand plans and shortened follow-through. But the real masterstroke came when I finally confronted John directly. I found him at Murphy's Tavern on Thursday night, holding court at the bar with his usual crowd of hangers-on and wannabes. John had always been magnetic in the way that certain people are, the kind who could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention. Jimmy, he spotted me before I'd made it 3 steps through the door. Come on over, let me buy you a drink. The crowd parted to make room for me at the bar, faces I recognized from around town but couldn't put names to. John's people, drawn to his energy like moths to a flame. Bourbon, neat, I told the bartender, then turned to face my brother. We need to talk. Sure. What's on your mind? The Riverside Shopping Center account. They're not happy about the promises you made. John waved dismissively. That's just a misunderstanding. I was trying to build customer loyalty, show them we care about their business. By offering free work we can't afford to do? Come on, Jimmy. You've got to spend money to make money. Think bigger, you know? There it was again. Think bigger. the phrase that had become my family's favorite way of telling me I wasn't good enough. I am thinking bigger, I said, loud enough for the whole bar to hear. I'm thinking about what happens when we promise more than we can deliver. I'm thinking about our reputation, our relationships with suppliers, our ability to keep the lights on. John's smile faltered just slightly. Hey, no need to get worked up. We're family, right? We work things out. Family. I let the word hang in the air like smoke from a bad electrical fire. That's an interesting concept, John. What do you think family means? It means we stick together, support each other, have each other's backs. Even when one family member is stabbing another in the back. The bar had gone quiet around us, the kind of silence that falls when people sense drama brewing. John's face went through several expressions before settling on confused innocence. I don't know what you're talking about, Jimmy. Sure you don't. I finished my bourbon in one swallow and set the glass down hard enough to make it ring. But here's the thing about electricity, John. Current always follows the path of least resistance, and lately I've been offering way too little resistance. I walked out of Murphy's Tavern, leaving John to explain my cryptic remarks to his audience. By morning, half the town would know that the Parish brothers were having some kind of falling out. The other half would know by lunch. Phase 2 was officially underway. At home, Beth was waiting with the kind of expression that meant trouble. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, surrounded by papers, and wearing the power suit she reserved for important meetings. We need to talk, she announced. Seems to be the theme tonight. What's on your mind? I heard you made a scene at Murphy's. Something about family loyalty? Word traveled fast in a small town, but not that fast, unless someone had called her directly from the bar. Just having a conversation with my brother about business practices. James, whatever problems you have with John, you can't air them in public. It reflects poorly on all of us. All of us. Interesting that she considered herself part of John's team rather than mine. You're right, I said, settling into the chair across from her. Family business should stay in the family. Speaking of which, how was your day? Busy. I had showings all afternoon, then dinner with potential investors. Anyone I know? That pause again, just long enough to confirm that she was crafting her response rather than simply answering. The Riverside Development Group. They're looking at several properties downtown. Sounds promising. What time did dinner wrap up? Around 9:30. Why? Just curious. I called the house around 8, but nobody answered. Beth's fingers stopped moving across her laptop keyboard. I must have been in the restaurant. You know how loud those places can be. Must have been. Well, I'm glad the meeting went well. I kissed the top of her head like a dutiful husband and headed upstairs, leaving her to wonder exactly what I knew and how much trouble she was in. In the master bedroom, I did something I'd never done before. I searched through Beth's things. Not obviously, not destructively, but methodically and thoroughly. Her jewelry box yielded nothing unusual. Her dresser drawers were exactly what you'd expect, but her closet was more interesting. Hidden behind her winter coats, I found a garment bag containing a dress I'd never seen before. Something expensive and elegant, with tags from a boutique downtown. The receipt was still in the bag. Purchased 3 days ago, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. A credit card in Beth's name, with an address I didn't recognize. I photographed the receipt and the credit card statement I found folded inside the garment bag, then carefully returned everything to its original position. Beth was building a financial life that didn't include me, preparing for a future where James Parish was no longer part of the equation. Well, two could play that game. The next morning, I paid a visit to my lawyer. Tom Bradley had handled Parish Electric's legal affairs for 15 years, and he'd drawn up Beth's and my wills when the girls were small. He was discreet, competent, and expensive enough to keep his mouth shut. James, good to see you. What brings you by? I handed him a folder containing printouts of everything I'd discovered over the past week. Bank statements, credit reports, photographs, receipts, a comprehensive dossier of my wife's double life. Tom reviewed the materials with the careful attention of a man who'd seen every variation of human betrayal that family law had to offer. This is thorough, he said finally. Very thorough. What are you looking to accomplish? I want to know where I stand legally. Assets, custody, business interests, all of it. Are you planning to file for divorce? I'm planning to be prepared for whatever comes next. Tom nodded and made notes on a legal pad. I'll need a few days to review everything and research the specifics of your situation. In the meantime, I'd recommend documenting everything you can about your wife's activities and your brother's involvement in the business. Already on it. James, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes marriages can be saved, even after infidelity. I thought about Beth and John in her car, about the secret credit cards and hidden dresses, about my daughters learning to see me as an obstacle to their mother's happiness. This marriage died a while ago, Tom. I'm just planning the funeral. That weekend, Beth announced that she was taking the girls to visit her sister in Chicago, a spontaneous trip that would give them some mother-daughter bonding time. How long will you be gone? I asked. Just the weekend. We'll drive back Sunday evening. Want me to come along? I haven't seen Linda in months. No, that's okay. This is really more of a girls' trip. Of course it was. And I was sure it had nothing to do with giving her and John some unsupervised time together. I waved goodbye from the front porch as Beth's BMW pulled out of the driveway with my daughters in the back seat, both of them absorbed in their phones and barely acknowledging my existence. Then I went inside and implemented Phase 3. Beth's home office was off-limits under normal circumstances, but these weren't normal circumstances. I spent Saturday afternoon going through her files, her computer, her personal papers, building a complete picture of the life she'd been constructing behind my back. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Beth wasn't just having an affair with John. She was planning to leave me, take the girls, and start a new life with my brother as her partner in both romance and business. The secret credit card was funding an apartment downtown, already furnished and waiting for occupancy. Her computer contained email drafts to a divorce attorney, outlining her position and requesting advice on asset protection strategies. She wanted the house, custody of the girls, and alimony based on the lifestyle I'd provided during our marriage. But the real kicker was a business plan for something called Riverside Property Solutions, a real estate and development company that would combine Beth's sales expertise with John's construction and electrical knowledge, my contacts, my reputation in the trades, built over 26 years of honest work. They were planning to steal my life, piece by piece, and leave me with nothing but the privilege of paying for it all. I printed everything and added it to my growing file, then did something that would have surprised my soon-to-be ex-wife. I smiled. Beth and John thought they were playing chess while I played checkers. They thought they were the smart ones, the sophisticated ones, the ones with vision and ambition. They were about to learn the difference between being smart and being underestimated. Phase 4 was going to be a real shock to their system. Sunday evening brought Beth and the girls home with shopping bags and stories about their wonderful weekend in Chicago. Bree chattered about the museums they'd visited, while Bo showed me a new sweater her Aunt Linda had bought her. "How was your weekend, Dad?" Bew asked, settling beside me on the couch. "Quiet. I caught up on some paperwork, fixed Mrs. Henderson's garbage disposal." "That sounds boring." "Sometimes boring is good, sweetheart." Beth appeared in the doorway, still in her traveling clothes, but somehow managing to look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "James, we need to discuss some changes to our financial arrangements." "What kind of changes?" "I think it would be better if we maintained separate accounts going forward. It would simplify things for tax purposes." Tax purposes. That was a new one. "Sounds reasonable. Why don't we sit down tomorrow night and go over everything?" Beth looked surprised, like she'd expected an argument. "Really? You're okay with that?" "I think separate accounts make sense at this point in our lives. We're both adults, both earning our own money. Might as well manage it independently." What I didn't mention was that I'd already moved most of our joint assets into accounts that required both signatures for withdrawal. Let her try to access funds that were no longer there. Monday morning brought the first real test of my new strategy. John showed up at the parish electric office like nothing had happened, ready to start another week of making promises with other people's money. "Morning, Jimmy. How was your weekend?" "Productive. We need to talk about your role in the company going forward." John settled into the chair across from my desk with the casual confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. "Sure. What's on your mind?" I slid a folder across the desk. "Your termination paperwork." The confidence evaporated like water hitting a hot wire. "What?" "You're fired, John. Effective immediately." "You can't fire me. I'm family." Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't make unauthorized commitments that cost the company money. And family sure as hell doesn't plan to start competing businesses using proprietary information and client lists. John's face went through several interesting color changes. "I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Riverside Property Solutions. I know about the apartment downtown. I know about the business plan that lists you as having extensive electrical and construction expertise, despite the fact that you couldn't wire a lamp without burning down the building." I opened another folder and spread its contents across the desk. printouts of emails, business registration documents, financial records, and several very clear photographs of John and Beth in compromising positions. I also know about this. John stared at the photographs like they might disappear if he concentrated hard enough. Jimmy, I can explain. No need. The pictures are pretty self-explanatory. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You're sleeping with my wife, stealing my business contacts, and planning to destroy everything I've built over the past 26 years. I stood up and walked around the desk, stopping just close enough to make John uncomfortable. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to clean out your desk, turn in your company keys, and never set foot in this building again. You're going to stay away from my family, my clients, and my business. And if I don't? I smiled, the kind of expression that had nothing to do with humor. Then these pictures get sent to every contractor, supplier, and potential client in the Tri-County area, along with a detailed explanation of your business practices and personal ethics. Your reputation in this town will be finished before lunch. John tried to stare me down, but he'd never been good at backing up his bluster with actual courage. After 30 seconds, he looked away. This isn't over, Jimmy. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet? I watched from my office window as John loaded his personal belongings into his truck and drove away, probably heading straight to Beth's office to report this latest development. Let them scramble. Let them try to figure out their next move while I stayed 3 steps ahead. Connie knocked on my door frame. Everything okay? Better than it's been in months. John won't be working here anymore. Good. He was costing us more money than he was making. Speaking of money, I need you to call Tom Bradley's office and set up a meeting for this afternoon. Legal trouble? Legal preparation. That afternoon, Tom Bradley reviewed my documentation with the appreciation of a craftsman examining quality work. This is impressive, James. Very thorough, very professional. I've had good teachers. What's my position? Strong, very strong. The adultery gives you grounds for divorce in this state, and the business planning documents suggest intent to defraud. The financial records show clear preparation for asset concealment. Tom leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. How do you want to proceed? I want to file for divorce, seek full custody of my daughters, and protect my business interests, but I don't want Beth to know until the papers are served. That's aggressive. She's been planning this for months while lying to my face every day. I think aggressive is appropriate. What about your brother? What about him? Are you planning any legal action related to his involvement? I thought about John's face when I'd shown him the photographs, the way his bluster had crumbled when confronted with evidence of his betrayal. John's punishment will be more personal than legal. Tom made notes on his legal pad, occasionally asking questions about dates, financial details, and custody preferences. By the time we finished, he had everything he needed to begin divorce proceedings that would hit Beth like a lightning strike. How long before the papers are ready? I asked. End of the week. I'll have them served Monday morning at her office. Perfect. That evening, Beth was unusually attentive, asking about my day and actually listening to my answers. Guilty conscience, probably, or maybe John had warned her that I was becoming suspicious. How's the real estate market? I asked over dinner. Busy, very busy. I might need to start working some evenings and weekends to keep up with demand. That's great, honey. Success is important. Bree looked up from her phone. Mom, can I go to Jessica's party next weekend? We'll see. I might have some work commitments. What about Dad? Can't he drive me? Beth and I exchanged glances across the table. In the old days, it would have been a moment of parental unity. 2 adults coordinating their children's lives. Now it felt like a chess move, each of us calculating the implications. I'm sure we can work something out, I said. After dinner, I helped Bew with her math homework while Beth disappeared into her office to catch up on paperwork. Through the thin walls, I could hear her talking quietly on the phone, her voice too low to make out individual words, but the tone unmistakably intimate. Dad, are you paying attention? Bew waved her pencil in front of my face. Sorry, sweetheart. What was the question? If Train A leaves Chicago at 60 miles per hour and Train B leaves Detroit at 40 miles per hour, when will they meet? I looked at the word problem, thinking about trajectories and collision points, about the inevitable moment when 2 objects traveling toward each other finally occupy the same space. That depends on when they started moving and whether they're on the same track. The problem says they're on the same track. Then they'll definitely meet. It's just a matter of calculating when and where. Bew worked through the math while I contemplated the metaphor. Beth and I were definitely on the same track, heading toward each other at increasing speeds. The collision was inevitable. I just wanted to make sure I was driving the heavier train. Friday afternoon, Tom Bradley called with news that made my week considerably brighter. Papers are ready for service. My guy will be at Beth's office first thing Monday morning. What should I expect? Shock, anger, probably some attempts at negotiation. She'll call you within an hour of being served. And then? Then the real work begins. But James, you need to be prepared for this to get ugly. Divorce always brings out the worst in people. I thought about Beth and John planning their new life together while lying to my face every day for months. How much uglier could it get? That evening, Beth announced another business trip, this one to Indianapolis to meet with potential investors for a commercial development project. How long will you be gone? I asked. Just overnight. I'll drive down Saturday morning, have dinner with the investors, then come back Sunday. Need me to watch the girls? Bree's spending the weekend at Jessica's house, and Beau can come with me. She likes road trips. Another lie, delivered with the casual confidence of someone who'd had plenty of practice. Beth's Indianapolis investors were probably named John, and the only thing they'd be developing was their exit strategy. Sounds like fun. Drive safely. Saturday morning, I waved goodbye as Beth and Beau drove away in the BMW, then immediately called Tom Bradley's emergency number. Change of plans. I want the papers served today. Today's Saturday, James. Her office will be closed. She's not going to Indianapolis. She's going to be with John, probably at that lakeside cabin he rents for his weekend parties. I want her served there, in front of witnesses. Tom was quiet for a long moment. That's vindictive. That's justice. It'll cost extra for weekend service. Bill me. 2 hours later, I was parked behind a grove of trees overlooking Crystal Lake, watching John's cabin through binoculars I'd borrowed from my hunting gear. Sure enough, Beth's BMW was parked next to John's truck, along with 2 other vehicles I didn't recognize. Through the cabin's large front windows, I could see people moving around inside. John, Beth, and what looked like 2 other couples. A party, just like the old days when John used to throw weekend gatherings for his various business associates and romantic conquests. Except now, my wife was part of the entertainment. At exactly 2 o'clock, a process server in a county sheriff's uniform knocked on the cabin door. I watched through the binoculars as John answered, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as he realized what was happening. The server asked for Beth by name. John tried to claim she wasn't there, but Beth appeared in the doorway behind him, probably curious about the commotion. I couldn't hear the conversation from my position, but I could see Beth's face clearly as the server handed her the divorce papers and explained that she was being legally notified of proceedings against her. Her expression went through shock, rage, and something that might have been fear before settling into the cold mask she wore when she was planning someone's destruction. The other party guests had gathered in the doorway by now, watching the drama unfold like it was dinner theater. Beth said something sharp to the process server, who shrugged and walked back to his car. Then she turned to John, and even from a distance, I could see that she was furious. My phone rang 18 minutes later. James, what the hell do you think you're doing? I think I'm getting divorced, Beth. The papers should make that pretty clear. This is insane. You can't just... We need to talk about this like adults. Adults don't lie to their spouses for months while planning to steal their assets and abandon their families. Silence on the other end of the line, broken only by background noise that sounded like John's voice raised in agitation. I don't know what you think you know, Beth said finally, but you're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was trusting you. James, please, think about the girls. Think about what this will do to them. I am thinking about the girls. I'm thinking about what kind of example we're setting, what kind of values we're teaching them. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, figure out how to fix things. Some things can't be fixed, Beth. Some things are just broken beyond repair. I hung up and turned off my phone, then drove home to wait for the next phase of my plan to unfold. Sunday evening brought Beth back to the house with the energy of a Category 5 hurricane. She slammed through the front door like she was planning to tear it off its hinges, leaving Beau to carry in their overnight bags while she stormed into the living room where I was watching television. We need to talk. Now. I'm watching the game. Turn off the television, James. We're going to discuss this divorce nonsense like rational human beings. I clicked off the TV and gave her my full attention. Beth was still beautiful at 41, still capable of commanding a room when she walked into it. But there was something desperate in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. The papers say you're seeking full custody, she said. That's right. That's ridiculous. I'm their mother. You're also an adulterer who's been planning to abandon them for months while you build a new life with my brother. Beth's composure cracked just slightly. It's not what you think? It's exactly what I think. I have emails, Beth. Financial records, business plans, photographs. She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, some of the fight going out of her posture. How long have you known? Long enough. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because I wanted to be sure. Because I wanted to understand the full scope of what you and John were planning. And now you do? Now I do. Beth was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands like they might contain answers to questions she hadn't thought to ask. What do you want, James? I want my daughters. I want my business protected. I want you and John out of my life. The girls need their mother. The girls need a parent who puts their interests ahead of their own selfish desires. You can't just take them away from me. Watch me. Beth stood up abruptly, her composure reassembling itself like armor. This isn't over. I have rights and I have resources. So do I. The difference is my resources aren't built on lies and betrayal. She left the room without another word, and I heard her upstairs packing suitcases with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this moment for months. 20 minutes later, she was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of expensive perfume and a house that felt lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from its foundation. Boo appeared in the living room doorway, her face streaked with tears. Dad, what's happening? I opened my arms, and she ran to me, collapsing onto the couch beside me like she was seeking shelter from a storm. Your mom and I are getting divorced, sweetheart. It's not your fault, and it doesn't change how much we both love you. Is she coming back? I don't know. But you and Bree will always have a home here with me, no matter what happens. Boo cried against my shoulder while I held her and wondered if I'd just won the most important battle of my life, or simply traded one kind of heartbreak for another. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of rain began tapping against the windows like fingers drumming on glass. The storm was just getting started. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, family conferences, and small-town gossip that spread through the community like electricity through copper wire. Beth had moved in with John temporarily, according to the rumors, though neither of them was showing their faces around town much lately. My daughters were handling the situation better than I'd expected. Bree, at 15, seemed almost relieved that the pretense was finally over. I knew something was wrong, she told me one evening while we worked on her history project together. You and Mom haven't been happy for a long time. Beu, being younger, was struggling more with the changes, but she was adapting with the resilience that kids somehow manage when adults fail them. Will we still get to see Mom? She asked over breakfast one Tuesday morning. Of course. She's still your mother, no matter what happens between us. What I didn't tell her was that Beth's visitation rights were going to be severely limited if I had anything to say about it. The business plan I'd discovered included provisions for relocating to a larger city once current obligations were resolved. Those current obligations, apparently, included her daughters. Tom Bradley called Wednesday morning with an update that improved my mood considerably. Beth's attorney wants to negotiate. They're requesting a meeting to discuss settlement terms. What kind of terms? Joint custody, division of assets, alimony based on lifestyle maintenance. Counteroffer. She gets supervised visitation, no alimony, and whatever personal belongings she can carry in her car. James, that's fair, considering she was planning to steal half my business and disappear with my children. The judge might not see it that way. Then we'll let the judge see the evidence and decide for himself. Thursday brought an unexpected visitor to the parish electric office. John's truck pulled up outside just before lunch, and I watched through my window as my brother sat behind the wheel for several minutes, apparently working up the courage to come inside. When he finally entered the building, he looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something that might have been genuine remorse. Jimmy, we need to talk. No, we don't. Please, 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I waved him into my office and closed the door. John settled into the chair across from my desk with the careful movements of someone who expected to be thrown out at any moment. I messed up, he said. That's an understatement. I never meant for it to go this far. Which part? Sleeping with my wife? Stealing my business plans or plotting to destroy my family? John winced like I'd slapped him. It started as just, I don't know. She was lonely, I was lonely. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. But it did mean something. Yeah, it did. We sat in silence for a moment, two brothers who'd shared a childhood but apparently nothing else that mattered. What do you want, John? I want to make this right. You can't make this right. Some things can't be fixed once they're broken. I could testify in the custody hearing. Tell the judge that Beth was the one who initiated everything, that she was planning to leave town with the girls. I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. All I saw was exhaustion and what might have been genuine regret. Why would you do that? Because those girls are my nieces. Because I've already destroyed one family, and I don't want to destroy theirs, too. What about Beth? Beth can take care of herself. She always has. John stood up slowly, like he was carrying a heavy weight. Think about it, Jimmy. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but maybe I can at least help you protect your daughters. He left without waiting for an answer, and I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to figure out if his offer was genuine or just another manipulation in a game that had already cost me more than I'd wanted to pay. Friday evening brought the confrontation I'd been expecting since this whole mess started. Beth appeared at my front door just as I was finishing dinner, looking like she'd been preparing for war. We need to talk, she announced, pushing past me into the house. The girls are upstairs doing homework. Good. This conversation is between you and me. Beth settled into the living room like she still belonged there, arranging herself on the sofa with the practiced grace of someone accustomed to commanding attention. John told me about his offer. Did he? He's lying, James. Whatever he told you, he's lying to save his own skin. What makes you think he offered me anything? Beth's composure slipped just slightly. He said he was going to talk to you about the custody hearing. And you're here to what? Counteroffer? I'm here to tell you the truth. I already know the truth, Beth. I have emails, financial records, business plans. You have pieces of a puzzle you don't understand. Beth leaned forward, fixing me with the intense stare she used on reluctant clients. John was never part of my long-term plans. He was just convenient, a way to feel alive again in a marriage that had been empty for years. So this is my fault? This is nobody's fault. This is two people who grew apart and made mistakes trying to find their way back to happiness. By planning to steal my business and kidnap my children? By trying to build something better than what we had? Beth stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the neighborhood where we'd raised our daughters and pretended to be happy for 22 years. I never wanted to hurt you, James. I just wanted more than this. This being what? A successful business, a nice home, 2 healthy daughters. This being a life where I felt like I mattered, where I was more than just the woman who kept your house and raised your children while you built your empire. Parish Electric isn't an empire, Beth. It's a small business that employs 12 people and keeps the lights on in a town that's been fading ever since the factories closed. And that's enough for you? That's all you ever wanted? I thought about the question, really thought about it. 26 years of building something from nothing, of solving problems and fixing things that were broken, of providing for my family and serving my community. Yeah, I said finally. That's enough. Beth turned away from the window, and for a moment I saw something in her face that might have been sadness. Then we really are finished. We've been finished for months, Beth. You just didn't bother to tell me. She gathered her purse and headed for the door, pausing just long enough to deliver her parting shot. The custody hearing is next week. I hope you're prepared for what comes out in court. I've been preparing for months. After she left, I sat in the quiet house listening to my daughters moving around upstairs, their voices carrying through the walls like electricity through familiar circuits. Whatever happened in court, whatever Beth and her attorney had planned, I'd done everything I could to protect what mattered most. The rest was out of my hands. Saturday morning, I took both girls out for breakfast at the diner downtown, partly because they deserved some normalcy and partly because I wanted to be seen around town with my daughters, looking like a devoted father rather than the villain Beth was probably painting me as. Dad, Bree said over pancakes, whatever happens with the divorce, we want to stay with you. Both of us, Bew added. We already talked about it. I looked at my daughters, really looked at them, and saw strength and wisdom that hadn't been there just a few weeks ago. They'd been forced to grow up fast, to make adult decisions about their own lives while the adults around them acted like children. Are you sure? Your mother loves you very much. We know, Bree said, but love isn't enough if someone's going to lie to you all the time. Out of the mouths of babes. The custody hearing was scheduled for Tuesday morning in Judge Patricia Morrison's courtroom. Judge Morrison had a reputation for being tough but fair, with little patience for games or manipulation. Monday evening, Tom Bradley called with final instructions. Be honest, be respectful, and let me do most of the talking. Beth's attorney is going to try to paint you as controlling and vindictive. What's our strategy? We present the evidence and let it speak for itself. The business plan, the secret apartment, the financial deception, it all points to someone who was planning to abandon her family for personal gain. What about John's testimony? That's our ace in the hole. Beth's own co-conspirator testifying against her? That's devastating. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cold. the kind of October day that makes you think about endings and new beginnings. I put on my best suit, kissed my daughters goodbye, and drove to the courthouse with the strange calm that comes from knowing you've done everything possible to prepare for battle. Beth was already there with her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman from the state capital who looked like she ate small-town judges for breakfast. Beth had chosen her outfit carefully, conservative, maternal, the picture of a devoted mother fighting for her children. Judge Morrison called the court to order at exactly 9 o'clock, and the battle for my daughter's future began. The next 3 hours were a blur of testimony, evidence presentation, and legal arguments that would determine the shape of my family's future. Beth's attorney painted me as a controlling husband who'd driven his wife to seek comfort elsewhere, then used his discovery of the affair to punish her vindictively. Tom Bradley countered with the business plan, the secret apartment lease, and financial records showing systematic deception over a period of months. The evidence was damning, but Beth's attorney was good at her job, spinning each revelation as the desperate act of a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage. Then John took the stand. My brother looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past month, but his testimony was clear and devastating. He confirmed that Beth had initiated their relationship, that she'd been the driving force behind the business plan, and that she'd discussed relocating to another city once the divorce was final. "Did Mrs. Parish ever discuss taking her daughters with her when she relocated?" Tom asked. "Yes. She said they'd be better off away from their father's influence." "Did she specify what she meant by their father's influence?" "She said James was small-minded and limited in his thinking. She didn't want the girls to grow up with the same limitations." Beth's face went white as John delivered the testimony that would cost her any chance of gaining custody. Her own lover, her co-conspirator, had just destroyed her case with surgical precision. Judge Morrison recessed for lunch, then returned with a decision that was swift and unambiguous. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Mrs. Parish engaged in systematic deception and planning that would have been detrimental to the best interests of her minor children. Custody is awarded to Mr. Parish, with supervised visitation rights for Mrs. Parish to be reviewed in 6 months. The gavel came down like a thunderclap, and just like that, it was over. Beth left the courthouse without speaking to me, her attorney already on her phone arranging appeals that would probably never materialize. John waited by his truck in the parking lot, looking like a man who'd just burned down his own house. "Thank you," I told him. "Don't thank me, Jimmy. I just told the truth. Should have done it months ago." "What will you do now?" "Leave town, probably. Start over somewhere else." He climbed into his truck and drove away, and I never saw my brother again. That evening, I sat on my front porch watching the sun set over a town that had been my home for 43 years, thinking about electricity and current flow and the way power always seeks the path of least resistance. For months, I'd been offering too little resistance to people who wanted to steal my life. But resistance, I'd learned, was just another word for strength. My daughters were inside doing homework, safe and secure in the knowledge that their father would always be there to keep the lights on and fix whatever was broken. Some things, it turned out, could be repaired after all. The story was over, but the life it had revealed was just beginning.